Hey, everybody. This is Jack from the Soul Patch Podcast. I have a quick message for you before we start the show. If you're living and working in South Korea, or you just have a Korea related experience that you would like to share, please come on the show and be our guest. We'd love to have you. You can contact us at podcast@thesoulpatch.com. That's podcast@thesoulpatch.com. Send us an email. We'll have you on the show. It'll be a blast. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to the Soul Patch Podcast, the podcast where three American expats explore different topics related to living and working in South Korea. With a combined 45 years of living experience in Asia, there are plenty of stories to tell. So, pop in your headphones and make yourself comfortable. It's time for the Soul Patch Podcast.
My tainted perception distorts my true meaning is blurred.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Soul Patch Podcast. We're talking to our friend George. George, how do you pronounce your last name, by the way?
It's Balareso. It's Ecuadorian name.
Okay.
Gives a lot of people a hard time.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't even attempt that because it would have been a massacre if I had. George,
the Z in Korea is not going to be very friendly for sure.
Right. Just for our listeners out there, George is kind of a special guest because he's a friend of ours, a colleague, somebody that we have known for a while, and he is the epitome of the adventurer guy. You know, he's like Bear Grylls meets I don't know, an ESL teacher or something. George, when did you arrive in Korea? Like, what brought you to Korea? I mean, was this something you had wanted to do for a long time, or teach English?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I guess.
Yeah, when I was in the United States, I took the standard, undergrad, graduate school, and got a job directly related to my major. Which involved sitting in a cubicle for 8 hours a day. And basically I got sick of that and was going through this kind of quarter life crisis. Like, am I going to do this for the rest of my life? And what's this all about? And just staring at my boss, watching him take the laptop home with him every day until 11 o'clock. And I'm like, oh man, what did I get myself into?
You never thought, oh man, maybe someday that could be me taking my laptop home for
right.
the
That's the dream, right?
The dream, right?
Your own laptop. Wow.
Yeah, maybe to do a podcast to talk about adventure travel, but that's about it. But at that time, it was just looking at spreadsheets, analyzing numbers for a company profit, basically, and it got old really quickly.
I think your story is actually is one that a lot of expats share. You know what I mean? Like sometimes, I mean, you said yours was a quarter life crisis. I think sometimes it happens even later for people where they just realize, oh my God, it's going to be 50 years in this same chair in front of this stupid screen, and I'll have seen and done very little,
Exactly.
So when did you have the wake up call, like the come to Jesus moment where you're just like, I'm going to pull the trigger and quit this job and really piss off my parents? Like,
yeah, basically as soon as I graduated from grad school, like I went down to Ecuador for a couple of months because my father is from Ecuador and I have extended family down there. And I just had a great time and just had this big realization, like, wow, the world is so much bigger than the United States, and there's a lot out there for me to experience. And so it was kind of really, it was like on the first day of work. So like at that job,
the first day
I just like the previous
You're like, holy
week,
shit, what have I done? Yeah,
I was climbing up an active volcano and just going through the jungles of Ecuador. And then here I am in a cubicle looking at a computer. And I'm like, what did I get myself into? But basically, just life kind of happened. I had a steady girlfriend a few months later. And my friends were all pressuring me to get married, just like they were, and have kids, do the normal route. And but I was just daydreaming, when can I get back out there? When's this going to happen? How long am I going to do this for?
So you got
And
the bug, basically. You got the travel bug. I mean,
Right.
being from a multicultural family, this and you know, I'm obviously this as an observer from the outside looking in. It seems to me that often the dream of the immigrant family patriarch is that their kids assimilate to the American, live the American dream, right? Like get the job as an engineer or whatever, work in the big company. Was there any sort of disappointment in your decision to kind
oh,
of?
of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, of course. Like my dad was just like, hey, why don't you go to law school instead? Or why don't you get an MBA, or you know, you can take the MCAT, of course, or do something like that. And you know, and then all of my coworkers were all engineers and kind of just going through the standard marriage, kids, and white picket fence with 1.2 dogs or whatever. And then all of a sudden,
0.2
3
dog
years, I quit my job, and all my coworkers were like, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "Well, I'm going to go down to Mexico with no plan, basically for 3 months with my backpack." And this was back in like 2007 when I'd say backpacking was a lot more rare back then. And basically with no plan. And they were like, "Yeah, you're going to Mexico, but the Mexicans, they all want to come to the United States. What's that all about? That doesn't make sense." Like that, those were the types of comments that I got. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're throwing all this away, like this great job, you had a girlfriend, you had it all. Everything was perfect for me, essentially.
How did
reminds
you
me.
then end
Sorry,
up coming
Kevin,
all the way to Korea then? I mean, going like starting in backpacking, but what brought you to this continent? What brought you to the land of the morning calm?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So after that trip, I came back for one of my buddy's weddings. I was the best man in his wedding, and then just had to do some soul searching. Like I taught English for a month in Guatemala as a volunteer, and really enjoyed that. Just really enjoyed being in the classroom with a bunch of screaming kids and just using like my energy. I'm a real physical guy. I love to work out, and you know, I ride my bike all over the world. So it was just like liberating to get up there and just do something a little bit more physical and interact with all these kids, and practice a little bit of Spanish at the same time, because I'm really into language learning. So that gave me a first taste of English teaching. And then I came back and was reading a book called Vagabonding by Rolf Potts. It's a pretty famous book in the travel writing industry. And then he mentioned that I think in about 2004 to 2007 that he spent some time in Korea, and he was working at a university, and just laid it all out, like what a university job in Korea is like. And he said, if you have a master's degree and you're a native English speaker, you can get one of those jobs. And I was like,
it used to be true.
At the time,
I have both of those. So let's do it. So so I just went on Dave's ESL Cafe, applied to a bunch of jobs, had a Skype interview for about 20 minutes. And before I knew it, they sent me a plane ticket, and I was on my way there.
Was your first job here the uni job? Did you start straight up?
My first job was at a hagwon.
Oh, okay. Everybody's got to do their time.
Yeah, so I figured I'll put in like a year or two at the hagwon, and then try to, you know, get a feel for Korea and see if I really want to invest in it long term, time wise.
Right.
And just realized 1 year wasn't nearly enough. Like it was just amazing. And,
I was on the 1 year plan, 20 years ago. I'm like, I'll just be a year and I'll be back. And 20 years later, I'm still here. Did you ever like consider like Peace Corps or anything like that? Was it ever, did anything like that ever come across your radar?
A little bit. I considered it, but I really didn't want to make like the 2-year commitment. And in the Peace Corps, they can kind of put you anywhere they so please. And
sure, you get Micronesia or God knows where,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just figured, I want to do something by my own volition on my own timeline. And the 1-year contracts at the time were very attractive. And I after my first 1-year contract, I took off to India for about 3 months with my backpack again.
Yeah.
And just had a mind-blowing experience in India, and came back to a public school for 2 more years, and applied to the university job.
Nice.
Which
Yeah, those 1-year contracts, you're right, in Korea are very attractive because it's a 1 year, but they pay for your plane tickets and you get that bonus right at the end that you can just like piece out on and really like play with. So they really are great for someone who wants to just like, do a little bit of work, live in someplace for a while, and then go.
Yeah, I was
fun.
totally sold on like the no strings attached part too. It's
Right.
like, okay,
Right.
6-month contract, I'll do it. 3 months, I'll do it. But now
Right.
I'm like, just give me a 4-year contract, 5 years, like as long as
Yeah.
as long as possible, I'll take it.
Well, I mean, the nice thing about the uni jobs that we have here is that we work, but we still get so much time in the summers and winters that it's pretty much equivalent to having these short contracts. You still have so much freedom to just piece out. And I mean, you're one of the guys that's like, finals are done, grades are in, click, airplane. Like you're gone immediately.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the advantages. And it's interesting, because when I'm on the road and meet people at the end of my trips, they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, you have to go back to work, and that must be so tough after riding your bike, and having all these amazing experiences." I'm like, actually, no, like I enjoy like being in the classroom. Like after 2 months on the bike, you're kind of tired and mentally worn out. So it's nice to get at least like 3 months of 3.5 months of stability in there. And then, but halfway through at the 1.5 month mark, you start thinking, wait a second, vacation's coming again. Yeah. Like, what am I going to do here?
Next time.
To think about that.
Nice.
So your initiation was can I ask where you grew up? Like which state in the United States?
Yeah, sure. I was in Detroit, Michigan, in like a middle class suburb, and
oh, nice. Okay, so you're a Midwesterner. I'm a
Midwesterner.
Yeah. Okay, so it's cold winters, humid summers, nice fall, nice spring, that kind of thing. And so your first initiation was going to Ecuador, which what would you that's probably like a kind of like a half step, right? Like a dip your toe in the waters and kind of test it out, and then you made the kind of the full, I would call it the full step, which is all the way to Asia, where there's really is no cultural similarities. Everything is exotic and new and strange for us, but it seems like you just keep turning the wrench, like you just ratchet it up like another notch, like this. Are you is it like I don't want to say this in a negative way, like I'm asking you kind of trying to ask you nicely, are you like an adrenaline junkie? You know what I mean? Like do you enjoy that, like putting yourself in these situations that are so out of your element, that's the juice for you? Like that's what you really kind of inspires you?
For sure. I'll be the first to admit that I'm an adrenaline junkie.
Yeah.
It's just, once I remember like the feeling, even in Korea, I had my first real like long distance cycling experience in Korea in my first year. And I was about 6 months in. It was the middle of December, the day after Christmas. I had a Christmas party in my box-sized studio apartment with a bunch of people. And then the next day I just took off on this third-hand bicycle that somebody gave me for free. And it was basically a rusted, like just piece of,
POS model.
metal and
right.
metal and rubber. But the pedals were falling off, the tires were all worn out and everything. And I just took off with no map, like no there were no smartphones at that time. And even though I just switched to a smartphone a couple months ago for the first time, but
welcome
yeah,
to modernity.
my goal on that first trip was just to basically get lost and use the little Korean that I knew at the time,
Interesting.
to have an adventure and get myself around that way. And it just kept pushing it, and that was back in 2008.
I'd like to push on this just a little bit then. So that first adventure, where did you get lost? What happened? What's something that happened on that trip where you didn't know much Korean? You're out in the middle of nowhere on a bike that barely rolls. Like what happened?
Yeah, well, I had no map on me either. I was just looking at street signs basically and trying to read the Hangul and get a feel for the cities a bit and just talk to people too. And I'd be like, okay, straight, left, right, hungry, thirsty, 24-hour sauna for sleeping, So
Nice.
I knew the basics basically to survive. But I just kept going in circles because I kept seeing like the same street signs, and I'm like, wait a second, I saw that barn over there just an hour ago. What's going on here? It's just like using landmarks essentially to get myself around.
You remind me of there's a book by John Krakauer called Into the Wild. I bet you've probably read that book.
Oh yeah, I love that book.
Chris McCandless, he instead of like because the area was actually already kind of well traveled, he just threw the map away and just said, screw it. Like, if I throw the map away, then it's an adventure for me because I don't know where any of this stuff goes. So nice. When you said that, it kind of reminded me of like of that story.
Yeah, definitely. That same book I read about the same time as Vagabonding with Rolf Potts. So that definitly left an impression. And
if you read those two, I haven't read Vagabond, but
pioneers.
But Into the Wild is, I mean, it's that's a huge inspiration for a lot of I bet a lot of expats that are living and working in Korea or elsewhere.
Sure.
So let's like fast forward a little bit. So you've finally settled into the uni job where and for listeners out there that I think we mentioned this before, but you got about a 2.5 month break twice a year. Would you guys say? Is that about right? Was it more than that?
Yeah,
3?
That's about right. Yeah.
Yeah. So you get like 5, you get to travel 5 months and then you're working the other 7 months. And the nice thing about it, the thing that I really like about uni is, if I digress a little bit, is that there's a beginning and an ending. Do you know what I mean? It's like, the semester
jobs are just kind of never ending, right? Like
it's the same as the cubicle thing, right? It's like you just like year after year, season after season. It's just my hair's falling out, and that's the only thing that changes. So with this, you get to look forward to a trip twice a year. I'm kind of curious, like, how much planning do you put into these trips? I mean, are you just like throw a dart at a map and buy a ticket and figure it out like you did with the Korea trip, or are these things a little bit more planned out? Like, I got insurance and all this sort of stuff in case I need to get airlifted by a helicopter out of Kenya or something like that. Like, how much preparation are you putting into these things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd say, I've had always like a list of places that I wanted to go to in the back of my head, but I haven't been, like, right now I can tell you like if the next summer and winter vacation, but beyond that I don't really know. But there are definitely places I'd like to go back to. Like I've been to China or to India about 3 times. I went to Pakistan once when the Taliban was there, which now that I think back on it was probably not a very smart move. But
you are an adrenaline junkie.
As an adrenaline junkie, I mean, it was just the biggest like adrenaline rush I've had, and I just remember going into markets and dressed up in local clothing, like in the shalwar kameez, like a Pakistani guy, basically.
I mean, are you the only Occidental in that whole area? I mean, are you running into anybody? And if you do, they're probably maybe CIA or something, Like,
yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I was accused of being CIA in a place called Peshawar, which is on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border.
Yeah.
Some guy waved me into his barber shop and signaled, "Hey, let's have a cup of tea together," because Pakistani people are really hospitable, and I think he figured out somehow that I wasn't from there. Maybe he heard me like talking to somebody and having problems with the language, and so I was sitting down in his barber shop trying to have a conversation over tea, and then the guy in the barber's chair turns around and says, "Oh, America, muerdabad." And I'm like, "Okay, muerte, that means die in Spanish." I'm like,
Right,
I can figure out what that means. And he's like, "You're CIA, aren't you? CIA." And I was like, "No, but I need to go right away."
Yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, that's one hell of a trip, no doubt.
That's
You're
terrifying.
bringing back to Korea though, since that's what we're here on. Like, what?
Yeah.
How do you plan all of your trips in Korea? Like, how do you pick the crazy places to go around here? Where have you found that was interesting, or how did you find them?
Sure. Yeah, just on off trying to get off the beaten path, There was a time when I would just do walking trips in Korea.
Nice.
And I'd start, in the winter. I actually
Why the
did
winter?
some.
What's up with
Yeah,
you
it
in
was
winter? Like
Right?
a bike trip in winter, Christmas.
Yeah, it's just where our vacations line up,
Yeah.
Fair
It's like
enough. Yeah.
it's either the cold winter or the steamy hot summer. So take your pick.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But yeah, I've done like walking trips in Gangwon-do, in the winter, and that was a good time. I mean, it's always nice to walk in the snow and enjoy the scenery, and the hospitality is really great too out in the countryside. People are always, they see you walking and they figure out that you're on a walking trip, and they're like, "Wow, it's going to get dark soon. You must be hungry. Where are you going to stay? Like, come and stay with us." And
Can we focus on this for a little bit then? Because that's really cool.
What is a walking trip? I don't think I've ever heard.
No, hold on, Jack.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
sorry.
Going to these like really small places. We've talked about this on the podcast a little bit about being in rural places versus being in the city. But you're walking in the middle of nowhere. You said you don't have a map, right? And you're just like looking around. Suddenly, you're encountering probably slightly older folks, I'm imagining, right? Because the people that are living out way in rural, it's like maybe farmer communities, things like this. They speak no English. They have very little contact with foreigners at all. Like, what's their first reaction when they see like random white dude walking out in the middle of our small town in Korea in the middle of winter? Like, how do they respond? You said hospitality is good.
Yeah.
Can you expound on that a bit?
Well, I'd say back in 2008, it was more like, they have very little experience seeing even people on TV,
Right.
But
TV's
now
changed
I think
a lot.
it's changed a lot. And back then, I could say a few phrases and I learned little by little Korean language, but they were always just basically like, "What are you doing? Why are you walking?" Basically.
I mean, the first 5 minutes
in the winter.
The first 5 minutes of the conversation must be like, where the hell is your car broke down? Where did your car break down? Wouldn't that be the logical kind of assumption? Like, your car broke down. You're trying to find some help or something, but they took you in. It was all right.
Yeah. They realized, that I tell them that, "Hey, I walked here from Seoul," or "I walked here from this place," and they're like, "Whoa, wait a second, you walked here from Seoul? That's like 200 kilometers from here. You must be hungry. Oh my gosh, your feet must be hurting. You must need a place to stay. It's cold outside. I have a warm room here." Like, just
and then you were talking about hospitality being really good. Like, would they invite you in immediately? Was it like just small things like, here's a sandwich, like, or a kimbap, be on your way? Or was it more like, come in, have food, like, let's hang out for the night?
Yeah, it's all of the above, really. I mean, some people, they see you and they're just, maybe they're busy or they're on their way somewhere and they have just an extra drink sitting in the truck and they're like, here, have this. And then,
Nice.
or if they have a snack or whatever, they'll give me the snack. And I've even had, some older people, like I just asked, hey, I'm hungry. Like, can you point me to a good restaurant in the area? And they walk me to the restaurant and they're like, here's 20,000 won and the meal's on me. Just take this money. And I'm like, no, I'm all right. I have money. Like I have a
You're like,
job.
this is
Thank you
by
very much.
choice. I'm not a
But
homeless person. Yeah.
I'm not homeless.
I enjoy walking. It's just, I'm doing this for fun in the winter. They're like, no, no, no. They won't accept no for an answer. They grab my palm and put the money in there and and make me take it basically. Yeah, I had that happen several times where, older people just insist on giving me money and don't take no for an answer.
Would they often join you for the meal as well, or did they just give you the money and be like, yo, here, eat here, it's good, here's some cash, I gotta go?
Yeah, the people that gave me money would just give me the money and be like, here, take this. I showed you, I did my duty. Here's 20,000 won, enjoy a meal and have a good time in my country, basically. And they'd say a lot of time like 한국 사랑해 주세요. It's like, please love Korea.
Love Korea. Nice.
Basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just their way of trying to make a good impression for a guest like me, in their country.
Yeah.
Nice.
I mean, that's probably the only time that is ever going to happen to them. You know what I mean? Like I imagine running into, I mean, it's such an interesting, like, it's such a fascinating thing to think about. I would love to be a fly on the wall and watch that interaction, as they kind of figure out what you're up to. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of them are genuinely worried about me too. Like a lot of them will say, oh, it's the winter. It's going to get dark soon. It's so cold. Like, where are you going to stay? And you can see their eyes getting big and, they're really worried. Like, they're like, you're going to freeze outside. You're going to freeze to death. Like, you can't sleep outside. You can't be outside after 6 or 7 o'clock when it gets dark. Like, you come and stay with us. Like, no problem. Just come. And they insist on it a lot of times.
I'm curious then, George, you said that you started doing these like crazy walking tours in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you'd only been here, what, like 6 months a year, right? So you were still quite new to country and language and all of that. And at that point, you don't really speak Korean very well. And for our listeners, like of most of my friends and people I know, like, you speak Korean probably by far the best. I mean, you've put the hours, you put the work in, you've got the Korean down. So how do people respond differently to you, when you're first new to Korean? You're just like, oh, 괜찮아요, it's okay, but you don't really know much. Whereas now you're just like, oh, no problem, bro, I've got the money, I'm just walking because I want to, completely fluently with them. How is that reaction different from, based on your Korean ability when you're meeting these people in these small villages and they're still not used to meeting foreigners?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say, like, I started with walking trips probably in my 2nd or 3rd year in Korea.
Okay. So not super new, but
I had a pretty good grasp on Korean at that time.
Oh, okay.
And enough to make, casual conversation and tell people what I'm doing and put sentences together and to string longer ideas together as well. But I think, they're definitely surprised and excited that they can actually have a conversation with somebody like me, because they're curious and they don't speak English and they really want to talk to somebody, and they're just happy that they can talk and share ideas and learn about what I think about their country. Especially, they really want to know, like, how is your life here? What do you think about this place? Like, what do you think of our food, our culture? Like, what are
curious of your opinions of it?
Yeah, basically.
Nice. So can I ask you a quick Korean question?
Sure.
Not about Korean specifically, but when I've been learning Korean, like, I'm mostly, I'm in Seoul. I'm speaking to Seoul people and younger people in general as well, from the Hagwons and every place I've gone to. How hard was it for you to understand the older people in these small communities? Because their Korean is different from what you hear on TV. Like, I get lost even when I'm speaking to my father-in-law. Like, I can understand my mother-in-law pretty well, But my father-in-law still, like, I get lost really quick because he's using like much older person dialect, and just his accent is thicker. And I can imagine that, these farmer people out in the middle of, tiny areas, like their Korean is going to be really tough to understand compared to what you're learning in the books and in the hagwons and in the institutes that you're studying in. How was that to get used to?
Oh yeah, definitely a big difference. I mean, in
No doubt.
Seoul, like kind of like what you mentioned, I was interacting with young people most of
Right.
the time in their 20s and 30s, especially females, like speaking to my girlfriends in only Korean language.
Right.
So you definitely get used to that, but at the same time, I always loved like just getting out there, and just found it fascinating to like listen to the different dialects, and the Gyeongsangdo and the Cheolado, and the different intonations. Um,
Were they
so,
pretty
but
good at changing their Korean to help you understand? Because I find young people generally a little bit better at adjusting their Korean to match my not fluent Korean. Whereas older people, because they've never met a foreigner before, they've never met a non-native Korean speaker, basically. And so
sure,
when
yeah.
they don't know how to not speak just fluent normal Korean.
Yeah. I don't really think that people in my daily interactions with Korean people, even like when I could barely string sentences together, I don't think I've had those many relationships where people would really dumb down their Korean, maybe just because they weren't used to talking to a non-native speaker of Korean.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I think it was really helpful for me,
Oh, sure.
because
You have
some
no choice
people
but to get there.
some people now, they see me and they're just like, 안녕하세요, 천천히 말할게요. They're like, I will talk very slowly for you. I'm like, no, don't worry. Like, just speak like you would to anybody else, in the neighborhood, the neighborhood Ajima or Halmoni. Just
I remember one
pretend
time I
I'm
was in a
yeah,
store
I'm
and someone was trying. This is when my Korean was very shitty at the time, and I just like ordered the food. So many Koreans will be like, you say one word to them, they're like, your Korean's amazing, and I was like, I'm still learning. Please speak slowly. And she was like, okay. So where are you from? What do you do? What's your hobbies? Blah, blah, blah. And she just went back to normal like instantly.
yeah, definitely.
So George, Ryan will appreciate this transition here. When did you go from perambulating to cycling? Like, when was that an upgrade? Was that just like you saved some coin and you're like, the walking trips are fun, but I want to move at a faster pace on a bicycle, because you cover more ground, right? I mean, it's like, I imagine walking, there's a lot of like just stretches where it's just like a freeway or something, and you probably want to get on with it. So when did the cycling thing kick in?
Well, I actually started out with cycling and would just mix in walking trips here and there just for some variety. But the cycling trips are definitely a lot easier. I mean, you go on a walking trip at the end of like a solid week of just walking. I mean, especially the summer times are just brutal. Your feet are all sore and swollen, and you have to really be careful of heat stroke and taking rests at the proper time during the day. Try to avoid like the 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. time period, and just find a place to chill out and take a nap basically in the shade somewhere.
It's not so crazy. I mean, it is crazy, but like for people listening, George isn't like on his own. I've seen on the bike trail, I've seen Koreans, a lot of kids in their 20s, and they're going for it. They'll take epic walks. They look like Sam and Frodo, they're doing the thing.
There's a bunch of
really? Okay.
groups that we have at our university. There's unique clubs where their goal, like they walk from Seoul to Busan or something like that, like every year. So I mean, this is not an uncommon thing.
I stopped some
these
kids.
Big walking tours.
I stopped some kids a while ago, many years ago. I saw on the trail because it was in a stretch. It's the main artery to Busan to Seoul. But it was one of the stretches that I was familiar with, and it was kind of no man's land. I was like, wow, what are you doing out here? Kind of thing. And so I talked to him for a little bit. The kid said they went through 3 pairs of shoes.
Oh, really?
Wow. Yeah. And it wasn't just because they were rubbing like the soles down. They were saying it's because of like discomfort. they didn't realize how bad their shoes were. They didn't understand like that it would be uncomfortable, and so on the fly they're just finding whatever they can to find to walk with.
Right.
So,
The worst thing you could do is buy a brand new pair of shoes and start hiking. You got to break those bad boys in, right? Like,
yeah. And they told me stories about all this stuff they threw away, you know, because they were all overpacked. And so,
Sure. Yeah.
It's like walking through the desert. It's kind of wild.
Yeah.
So anyway, you're saying about getting back to,
I was going to say there's a club at our university where they do that. I think every 6 months or so they walk across Korea, and a lot of students, you know, they have stories about that. So it's interesting.
Yeah, I've talked to them for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
For some reason, it just reminds me of Forrest Gump. I'm just, I'm just going, and I don't know when I'm coming back.
Yep.
You know,
the beard gets longer and longer every day.
You go to Hyundai, take a look. All right, I'm going back to DMZ. You know, have a look.
That's right.
So what are some of the like craziest things you've done in Korea? Like, what are some of the most exciting trips you've or not even exciting, but just like some of your favorite places that you've visited here in Korea?
I would say I really enjoyed Ulleungdo. I spent probably a week on Ulleungdo, just walking around the island and pitching my tent.
Just in case there might be some people out there that don't know what you're talking about, Ulleungdo, which I may be one of those. Where is that? And
that's the island, Jack. I talked about it before. That's the island that you stop at before going to Dokdo.
Oh, okay.
But Ulleungdo itself is actually quite nice. It's a really cool island. But basically, like that's where because Ulleungdo's kind of, I don't know about halfway, but it's between the mainland and Dokdo. So anyone who's going to Dokdo will go to Ulleungdo first, generally camp out for a night. Not always. There are boats that just connect you straight over. But usually you'll stay in Ulleungdo for a couple of nights and do a Dokdo tour from there and back. But Ulleungdo is a destination in itself. You don't have to do Dokdo when you're in Ulleungdo. It's just a chill place.
What was the attraction there? What drew you to that place?
Just the nature was just unbelievable. I had always seen pictures. It's just like this giant mountain just shooting out of the sea, and it's a 3-hour boat ride from Gangneung or Donghae. And
you get seasick.
The boat ride is famous for being like people getting seasick. They just have barf bags. Like
I got it bad.
Everybody around. I was fine. Like I was reading a book. The boat was all going up.
Those boats are really bad for me. Like I get I'm not very good with motion in general, but those boats are really bad for me. Every time I've done the Ulleungdo trip a few times at this point. And every time I do, I just take tons of seasick medicine because now I know I get fucked. But those boats, the reason, Jack and Ryan, if you haven't been there, the reason those boats are so bad is because they're inside. They're like those big, what are they called, George? It's like not a pontoon boat, but they come out of the water. So like instead of being like a V shape, they're like two kind of masts that come down. So when they come out, the center underneath the boat. Thank you. Fantastic.
Hydrofoil, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. They're like those. So they move pretty damn fast across the water, but in order to move that fast, they close it all off because otherwise you're just being blasted with wind. And so for anyone who gets seasick a lot, that wind and fresh air is really important. It helps kind of snap you out of it.
Yeah.
And for me, being on those boats and in the moving with no wind, with no fresh air, I'm just straight into the bathroom.
I'm already getting nauseous.
Hydrofoil, like the boat that goes to Fukuoka where it rises up out of the water.
That's right.
Maybe I haven't done those, but
it is. Yeah, I took that one through my first year in Korea.
I think that's like one of the coolest designs. I've never been on one my whole life until I came to Korea.
Yeah,
I was kind of blown away by it. I thought it was really neat.
I was excited until about half an hour in when I couldn't stand anymore.
Oh my God. That's awful.
Yeah, that's another good trip going from, I'd say, leaving from Busan to Fukuoka and the hydrofoil. They had the hydrofoil. This is back in 2008, and then they had like a slower boat that was
right
that I enjoyed a lot. I took the hydrofoil on the way to Japan, and then the larger, slower ship back to Korea, and enjoyed the slow ship a lot more because there were a lot more amenities like They had a Norebong, a restaurant, a bar,
Nice.
like a nice
So
area.
you
could
were
go
roughing it
outside
then.
and get
Yeah.
fresh air.
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
it was like luxurious, of
The
course.
hydrofoils are nice. They're fast, but right, it's more just to get you there.
Yeah. They had these little cubby holes. You couldn't really see much, and you had to really.
I'm kind of
press
coming late
your-
to this conversation, and I know we're about halfway through here, and I wanted to be sure to get one question in that I wanted to put into the podcast, and I wanted to share with all the listeners. So I'm sure it's been well established by now, like George is an adventurer, and he has his own podcast that you guys got to check out. But I'm very curious about your domestic adventures. I love biking here. That's also been established in this podcast, and I love touring here. But the way that you do it, you do a lot of like you like camp backcountry, you just pitch your tent. Like I rarely do this. Usually I'll go and find like a place to crash. So given that situation where you're trying to be much more independent than I am, what's the dodgiest situation you've ever gotten into? Like walking or camping, like
Going straight for it, Ryan.
Or
you took the words right out of my mouth. I'd love to hear this. Yeah.
Okay, I'm glad you guys didn't
Nice.
touch it yet. I was a little.
No.
That's why I was just trying to like think. Did they talk about it yet?
No. This is a great question. Great question.
Yeah, that is a good question. I don't know. For me, it's dodgy is a relative thing, and
Yeah, sure.
Korea is just like this one of the safest places I've ever been. So,
Right.
for example, if I go up on like a mountain and just pitch a tent anywhere, like in Soraksan or Myeongjisan and Gapyeong or Gangwon-do, any mountain, like all the locals will be like, "There's going to be wild pigs at night. What are you going to do when the wild pigs come?" And I'm like, I just camped a couple of weeks ago with lions in Africa, and pigs seem pretty friendly, and I don't eat samgyeopsal, so why should they be angry at me? I'm a vegetable guy. And so as far as danger or dodginess, I think for those listeners out there that want to get into adventure travel, I think Korea is a really good place to warm up and get started. I mean, sure, you can really get out there and get caught in a rainstorm or a snowstorm in Gangwon-do. But as far as like, animal attacks or getting mugged or something, it's a great place. And the anemones are great. There's food and water, restaurants everywhere, people to help you if you need it.
And I would totally agree. In my experience too here, compared to going anywhere else, the comfort here, not just the safety from lions and tigers and pigs, but it's a very small area. You're never very far from emergency services or fresh water. You're gonna find it. So let me rephrase the question then. If not like the most dodgy thing, then like what was the biggest discomfort that you've had?
When did everything fall apart for you?
Here's a good
Murphy's
story.
Law kind of trip.
I just thought of where I was genuinely frightened for my life.
That's good. That's a good start.
So
It'll be fun.
So I was in a place called Namhae, which is one of my favorite places in Korea to visit. I've been going there. I've been there like 4 or 5 times, and there's this mountain on Namhae called Mangunsan, and so I was hiking by myself in this mountain in Namhae, and ended up going off trail a little bit, and then it starts getting dark. Luckily, I had a tent in my backpack and everything I needed, but I found myself on these pretty steep slopes, like right as the sun was going down. I had my 2G phone on me at the time for a light. Like that was what
you
I
didn't have
used.
a torch?
I had nothing, no torch, nothing, just my 2G phone. And because I'm pretty bare bones when I go out and do these things. And I usually just tell myself, I'll find a place to sleep before it gets dark. No problem. Why do I need a light anyway? It's just the moon's going to be there. It's not, I'll be fine. And that didn't happen. I was caught on the slopes right as it was getting really dark. And it was just like every minute I was just panicking. I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to get off this mountain or find the trail or find a flat place to pitch the tent. And just every minute that went by, it kept getting darker and darker. And
What time of
then
year was this?
this was not that long ago, I guess, right before COVID. So I'd say 2019, 2018.
And what time of year? Like what season?
In the summertime. Yeah.
Okay, so it's
So
you don't have to worry
luckily,
about
I
being
had
cold
more
at least.
daylight then.
Yeah.
Yeah, at least. And so it's all of a sudden I find myself in this pitch darkness, and then I just have to somehow pitch my tent on the slope,
On a
and I'm just like trying all night long, just like, okay, I didn't waking up, I'd shut my eyes for like 5 minutes at a time, or what seemed like 5 minutes, and be like, okay, I didn't fall off this mountain anymore. Let's focus on just getting enough rest and not, tumbling down to my death here. And yeah, I just took it, 5 minutes at a time, or, one power nap after another, basically all night long. And then the sun came up, and I was still like worried. I couldn't like find my way off this trail. And I went to came up to this really steep part of the mountain. And if you have any experience hiking, it's a lot scarier going downhill than it is going uphill. Like you can climb uphill and you'll be fine most of the time, but most accidents happen like going downhill.
Agreed.
Right. You twist your ankle or something like that, and then you're screwed, right? I mean,
yeah, well, just gravity is not working in your favor when you're going down. So I was just going up, gaining elevation, and was like, I hope I can find the path like up there somewhere. And if I have to turn around, like I'm really in trouble. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And I just kept digging away at it. And finally I found the path, but man, I was seriously nervous that my life could have been in danger that evening.
Maybe I'm mistaken, but it's always those like benign situations where things seem to go sideways, right? Where it's like it's like it's just a normal day, everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden it's like 0 to shit show in a second. They make great stories though when you pull out of them.
Now that you're safe,
now that you're okay.
Now it's fun to think about, but at the time, and
I'm curious about your backcountry trips, actually, George, because I've done a bit of camping here in Korea with my diving team and stuff like that. But we were almost always, there was one time we camped not at like a campsite, but pretty much always when we would do camping, it was like, here's a campsite. Here's a campsite. It doesn't seem like backcountry camping is as much of a thing here. So when you would set up your tent, you said most people, they didn't really care that you were camping there. They're more worried like you're going to get eaten by boars or something, but the camping itself is okay.
Yeah, most of the camps, like in national parks, you're not allowed to camp, but people still camp. Like, I remember going to a park, for example, called Bangtaesan in Gangwon-do. It's a little bit off the beaten path. And this was right before COVID too, and in the spring or early summer. And I had a big bag with me, and I was just walking past some rangers in the entrance to the park, and they had these megaphones, and they were like, just make sure you don't camp here. Whatever you do not camp. You are not allowed to camp. They said it like 3 or 4 times in their,
they see you going by.
And
so
like,
you
yes,
camp
sir,
there,
whatever
right?
you say. Yeah. And of course I'm going to camp,
Right.
And so I go up there, it gets dark. I find a nice place to pitch by myself. And, after, once it starts to get dark, you see a lot of people coming down the mountain, and they're like, what are you doing? You're going up. Like, it's too dark. I'm like, I'm going to camp. And they're like, you get the normal, oh, aren't you scared? Okay, wild pigs and this and that. And, but anyway, I camped out that night, and the next morning I went up to the top, and it was just like a sea of people up there just camping, and at the top of the mountain. And everybody does the same thing. The park rangers are there telling you not to camp, but everybody does it anyway. So
kind of interesting, kind of cool to know that it's like not okay, but it's okay at the same time, or at least it's done, even if it's not like okay. Interesting. I didn't realize that there was such a big backcountry community here, actually.
George, even on I was going to say, even on more popular mountains like Soraksan, right? It's one of the more famous mountains. I went there just last fall with a buddy of mine, and almost at the top of Soraksan, there was a park ranger station, and one of the rangers was coming down, assisting somebody that had injured themselves on Soraksan, sprained an ankle or something, and was like, this mountain's so dangerous. Like, the wind is terrible up there. And he's like, you're not going to camp up there, are you? And I was like, no, sir. Even though my friend had like a tent like hanging out of his backpack, it was so obvious. And I was like, oh, no. And he was like, well, how high are you going tonight? It's getting dark. I'm like, just a little bit more. And they're like, how long will you hike for? Like, in a pretty stern tone. I'm like, maybe 20 minutes or so. We're going to go just up a little bit higher and turn around. Don't worry. We'll turn around. And so we walk up there a little bit higher, and then some other older folks were coming down, and they're like, yeah, there's another ranger station up there, about a 20-minute walk from here. They won't let you camp. So we're like, okay, we're here in between the ranger stations. So we found like the perfect spot,
the sweet spot,
Yeah, right.
And just pitched the tent there,
sandwich
right in the sandwich. Yep.
Yeah. George, I'm curious to dig around in your brain a little bit here, just because I've noticed that one of the themes of your adventures is that you're often going off solo on these adventures. These are almost like personal tests. Is that like what is it that drive, like, do you long for the social aspect of it, or do you like the solidarity? I mean, is that part of the attraction to you? I think for me, I don't know, maybe I played too much Nintendo in the 90s or something, because I just don't have I need the stimulation of a friend or a group or something. It almost seems like it's like meditative or something for you. When did you realize that you enjoyed that? Have you always been that way, or is this something that you've learned to appreciate? I'm just curious about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. But I'd say, I definitely enjoy like connecting with people. And I find that being alone, going on these solo trips enables me to do that, at a deeper level than going with a friend or two, because I can do things my way. I can go as slow as I want, as quickly as I want, or I can stop and talk to people and have a 3-hour conversation, with the local guy who invites me into his home, and just, people I find are very welcoming if you're on your own, and
you're not going to have that experience with a friend. It's not going to be the same. The dynamic changes if it's 2 people or 3 people meeting
I can
a person.
totally agree with this.
Yeah.
Like, especially any trips that I've done, I would say probably like 70% of the trips that I've done in general since coming to Korea have been solo, and then 30% is with a friend, usually a girlfriend. And both are great. But when you're on your own, it doesn't take long, like maybe 3 days. Man, you can talk to other people. Like George, I'm sure you would confirm this.
Yeah.
Anybody else, like Kevin knows what I'm going to say.
Sure.
You change. Like, suddenly you're cool to be alone, but then when you do interact with people, you're like Mr. Charisma. And I just feel like everybody likes me, and I'm able to converse with everyone, and I'm
Everyone just likes you, Ryan. That's just
Well,
what it
oh,
works
thanks.
anyway.
But you've built up a reserve of charisma that needs
Maybe
to be
that's what it, yeah, it's like a
expended or
meter
something
going
like
up.
that.
Saving it up.
Yeah.
It kind of
Nice.
feels like that. It feels like
Yeah.
I just get along so easily, and I'm so curious about people. I think my patience increases or something like this. I think that's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's yeah, I know you guys know what I'm talking about. You travel solo, it happens to you.
I don't have a lot of experience with that, but I guess my one curiosity would be, a walking trip and you're faced with a 50-kilometer walk, no people. What goes on in your head? Like, are you singing a song? Are you playing OK Computer, the Radiohead album from start
999
to
bottles
finish?
of beer on the wall.
Yeah, how do you guys do this? This is for Ryan and for George and Kevin, if you also travel alone. I'm just
I
curious.
don't know. For me, it's flow. It's the same reason I love endurance running. It's the same with biking. It's the same with travel. It's all the same category. It's play music, whatever. It's just flow.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't really think in words in that mode, and that's why I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity too when you're out there to really like get to know yourself. And I have a pretty consistent meditation practice, and it helps. Like when I'm not meditating, when I'm out there on my own, I realize how crazy my thoughts are and what thoughts I should pay attention to or ignore. And it's just a really interesting way to just get away from everything and see what's happening up in my head, for better or worse. And
Nice.
on those long stretches. But I never find, on these trips, you always find like-minded people too, and you can make connections with people that are on the same, into the same things that you are. So that's one of the advantages.
What about the ephemeral nature of those relationships, though? Does that cause you any pain, or knowing that this relationship with this person that took me in and fed me, that's the extent of the relationship? It runs its course within a 12-hour 24-hour period, on like a deep relationship with a friend or something. Do you I guess I'm just curious, like, if those, does that give you sadness, or do you just feel grateful in that moment because you're in that meditative state where you're just living in the now, and this is what's happening now, and there is no future, there is no past, it's just, this is what we're doing, we're eating together? I mean, is that?
Yeah, that's a great question too. And I think that's the advantage of Korea, like being a small country, is that even if I meet somebody that's outside of Seoul, like Korea is not that big, and I can get on a bus for 3 hours or 4 hours and go visit that person. And I have done that, just met people on random hikes.
Oh, you have gone back and maintained relationships.
Friendships. Yeah, sure.
Okay. Very cool.
So that's a great advantage. Even like, backpacking in random places, in Ethiopia or in India, I would meet Koreans and they'd be like, yeah, I'm from Busan. And then it's like, okay, next time I'm in Busan, let's hang out, and we make it happen. So it's nice, a guy like me from Detroit, if I meet somebody from Seattle in the middle of, Kenya, it's like, okay, basically you would have that feeling like, okay, when am I going to go to Seattle? like the United States is just so big,
It can be
Meeting
sweet
Koreans
sweet in the
abroad
other way too, though. It
great.
goes both directions, right? Like I was just thinking, just for COVID, my last big trip, I ended up in Bali. I was at a wedding, and a cousin of the groom, I think is who it was. Anyway, it was him and his wife. We became kind of friends, and we spent like 4 days together. We went over to the Gili Islands, Lombok and stuff, and it was just a nice little adventure. And we were saying we really got to know each other. And then on the day of like parting, it was like the goodbye, and it was like, someone said, mistakenly said, "See you later," right? Which is absurd. These people live like in northern Canada, like Whitehorse or something. And so uh the guy, he just like turned to me, he's like, "Dude, I'm never gonna see you again." He just started laughing. I'm like, "Yeah, I know." We just gave each other a hug, and it was like high five. That was it.
Wow.
And on that,
Yeah.
I remember when my wife and I were in Tahiti on our honeymoon. I don't remember the word. I need to find it again, but they taught us the word for basically goodbye there. But what they told me is that the way that word translates for goodbye is "see you tomorrow." That's just what they always say for goodbye there. And I think that was kind of just a cool. I mean, it's like, yeah, you might probably never see that person again,
Right.
but
Yeah,
see you
well,
tomorrow.
I don't think
Like,
I
that's
said
just
that. I
what
didn't
it
say
is.
this. I didn't say the story correctly. The point wasn't that he was like dismissive of our brief friendship. It was more like hey, it was. I don't. It felt good. It was like we had this moment. Yeah, I'll probably die and never see you again. But awesome. We had a good time. It was just sometimes it's nice to acknowledge that things are transient. I mean, all relationships ultimately are. I mean, you are.
Yeah.
To get too
Yeah,
deep.
sure. Yeah,
Anyway, we've gotten really
reality.
deep here for a bit,
Yes,
and I just to wrap things up. No, it's fantastic. But just to wrap things up, George, if you have any advice you'd want to give to anyone who's coming to Korea, who wants to get off the main trail, wants to see something other than the palaces in Seoul and Jeju Island and stuff like
Hongdae and Itaewon.
exactly. What
Yeah.
would you tell someone coming to Korea who wants to experience something smaller, something different?
Yeah, I would say just get out there, go anywhere, get outside of Seoul. You can go with a friend, you can go by yourself. There's trails all over the country, hiking trails, there's bike paths. I mean, just get out there, explore, enjoy all the jung, as they call it. Jung is kind of like hospitality and kindness and love, that Koreans are known for and are proud of, and that you see more of that in the countryside than in Seoul, because people are so busy and working all the time. So just get out there, see a different side of Korea, and you'll fall in love with Korea all over again. And
Just tell the park rangers you're not going to camp, but do it anyway.
yeah, just some rules are meant to be
moral
broken.
of the story.
Just
Sandwich
have to know
yourself.
which one they are. Yeah. And
Nice.
just get out there, enjoy, make friendships, and have a good time while you're here.
Nice.
That's what I would
Nice.
say.
Thanks. That's
Yeah.
great. And George, you've got a podcast too. Do you want to plug yourself? Do you have any social media? Where can people find you?
Yeah, sure. I started a podcast recently. It's called the Intrepid Global Citizen Podcast. And we focus on what I like to call an adventure-based education. So I bring people on that have walked or cycled, through Central Asia. I had a guy that's walking across Malaysia for spreading environmental awareness and picking up trash on there. We have a guest coming on that's going to attempt to break a unicycle world record, cycling around the world on a unicycle.
Oh
He's
boy.
going to start this upcoming May. So he's going to come on and talk about his upcoming trip.
Very cool.
So yeah, just lessons learned from the road, a lot of stories, a lot of wisdom. And the moral of the story is people are good, and get out there, enjoy the world for what it is, and make friendships, make connections, and just enjoy, because tomorrow you might not be here. Tomorrow's not guaranteed. So
Very true.
Yes.
George, you want
Intrepid
to
Global Citizen
throw
Podcast.
out your website really quickly too?
Yeah, sure. The podcast, you can find it on all the major apps. It's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can also check out my YouTube channel, Intrepid Global Citizen. I've got a lot of videos on Korea, the walking trips, the biking trips, all different places all over the world, Ethiopia, Kenya.
Oh, your YouTube
Siberia.
channel is awesome. You've got quite a few views on there too. So a lot of people are digging it, obviously.
Yeah. That's been my entertainment way to entertain myself during the pandemic, especially is doing the domestic trips in Korea and YouTube uploads.
We might need to
So-
hit you up with some advice for YouTube channel in regard to YouTube
Sure,
channel.
anytime.
Right.
All right.
Well, I'm just going to throw out to our listeners there that you guys know where to find us. We're at thesoulpatch.com. It's a one-stop shop where you can, listen. You can stream the podcast right from the website. You can download us from Apple, Spotify, Google, all the same places where you can find George's podcast. We do throw the podcast up on our YouTube channel, which is the Soul Patch Podcast. And we do have a Patreon button. If you have a couple,
and Jack, you told me that doesn't work on the mobile site, so I need to fix that. But if you wanted to send us a coffee, do it from your computer instead until I fix the website.
Or change your phone over to desktop mode, and
that might work.
That'll work
well.
too. Yeah, so you can smash that.
I'll try and fix
button.
the site this weekend.
Yeah, you could buy us a cup of coffee, and that'll go towards producing the show for everybody, and lets us continue to do this every week. And I think last but not least, if you can, I'll say this, do this for George's podcast too. If you can find it in your heart to leave us a review or a comment on Apple Podcasts, that really affects the charts and our rankings and everything. So if you could hook us up that way, that would really be helpful. And George, thanks again, man. It was a super interesting conversation. Loved it. Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
there's more to talk about.
Sure.
Yeah, anytime, man. You got an
about.
open invitation on the Soul Patch for sure.
That sounds great.
All right, we'll catch you next week on the Patch. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
I like to pay a couple respects to the people that made me what I am today. Dawson Gear.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
The quiet man.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
Dopamine. Jim.
It's all my love. It's all my love. It's all my love.
The brain.
It's all my love. It's all my love.
Hey, Bobby.
Let the bass go.
Call me an eater, call me an animal.